What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Jake Shavink here, and today we're looking at some third round fits for the Green Bay Packers in the 2023 NFL Draft. A pretty good spread of positions here, and I think that, obviously round one, round two are going to dictate a lot of, what's going to be the position the Packers definitely focus on in the third round, but there are a lot of guys I think that the Packers could look at, and we're going to dive into a dozen of them here in this video. So let's start off at the wide receiver position. Why not? Great position to start out at. And we're looking at Jonathan Mingo to start off from Mississippi, the wide receiver. 6'1 3/4, 220 pounds, 98th percentile athlete, 51 catches, 861 yards, 5 touchdowns. And I think a big thing to look at is 7.3 yards after the catch per reception. Pretty good number. Obviously, he's winning vertically down the field, so that's getting inflated a little bit. But he also was part of the screen game, the quick game, and he ripped off some big runs after the catch. And I think with Mingo, and you can look at this video above for a bigger breakdown, but I think with Mingo, you're looking at a lot of size and speed. I think his hands have gotten a lot better. I know there was some issues with him with body catching, and I think he kind of solved it. He cut his drop rate in half from 2021 to 2022. That's a good thing. But again, a really long strider, but he gets up to speed really quickly, can win the double moves. I think he does a pretty good job in contested spots. I think, like I said, his hands have gotten stronger. And where he can really thrive is after the catch, right? Because he's a bowling ball, right? He turns into a running back, basically. He's got the speed to erase angles. And I think the biggest thing with him to look at is, you see a player who is ascending as a route runner. I think, sometimes he gets a little high pad level before he gets into his break. And I think some corners are able to recognize when he's going into his breaks. But ultimately, I do think there are flashes of him, getting in the blind spot, using the pressure step on crossers, right? He's doing a lot of things that, are more advanced. There are flashes. There are little bits and pieces of that there. Ultimately, I do think, though, he fits in Green Bay really well as a power slot, right? He's going to be able to block. He's taking reps in line, right? He's the wing in Mississippi's offense at times, taking on important blocking assignments in the run game. So a player who I think is really going to start out in the slot, but again, a guy who, has the frame to win at the catch point, and, it could be a multifaceted threat in Matt LaFleur's system. Now, we're going to stick at the wide receiver position once again here. We're going to go to Wake Forest wide receiver A.T. Perry, 6'3.5", 198, 96th percentile athlete, and he ran a really nice 4.47 40, which is a really nice number for a bigger, ultimately lean, but a bigger receiver. And the production is obviously off the charts. In 2021, you see 71 catches, 1,296 yards, 15 touchdowns, 81 catches, 1,100 yards, and 11 touchdowns in 2021. 2.57 yards per route run per PFF. That's a pretty strong number across the board. And with A.T. Perry, I think you see a lot of encouraging things with him in terms of how he plays the game. Like we talked about, that 4.47 40. I think he's unlocked the ability to be a good deep threat. I think you watch him vary up the pacing. He doesn't accelerate super fast, but I think when he's still got that build-up speed and the long speed to kind of threaten and stack corners to win vertically, I think there's a lot of suddenness and twitch to his game in terms of his release, in terms of his through break transitions as a route runner, and, solid pair of hands, work through contact, catch away from the frame. And, he's got a little bit of twitch, quickness post-catch that, might shock some defenders as well. I think winning more at the catch point is something that you could knock him for, and something that he definitely has to get better at, no doubt about it. But the production's there. I think when you listen to him talk about how he plans his routes and how he has a plan of attack into every route based on leverage, based on the coverage that he's seeing, right? Based on where defenders are rolling to. If somebody's blitzing from inside, where is he going to fit in the zone? I think he has such a great mind to play the receiver position. And that's why I think, at pick 78, I think the fit would be really nice in Green Bay. You're still adding another, guy who can potentially press vertically as well. Not at the level of Watson, but enough to where it's going to open up the middle of the field. So let's switch up to tight end now. Two names I think to look out for at tight end. The first being, if he falls this far, is Tucker KRAFT from South Dakota State. 6'4 3/4, 254 pounds, 96th percentile athlete. That's really impressive. Almost 13 yards per reception. That's a pretty key metric when you look at, what star tight ends have done in college. You often see them hitting 14, 15 yards per reception. So it's nice to see KRAFT hit that number in 2022. Obviously, had his most production in 2021 when he played most of his games, right? He missed a lot of time in 2022, but he caught 65 for 770 and 6 touchdowns in 2021. And I think what you notice with KRAFT right away is the acceleration and the speed that he has to threaten up the seam, right? He's got a natural pair of hands, catch through contact. He's really good in that regard, and I think you see a converted running back, that's what he is. You see that converted running back pop up in a lot of places in terms of the route breaks, right? In terms of just agility in general, being elusive after the catch. He is a lot more nimble and elusive, I think, than he's given credit for post-catch. And I think that's something that, again, is just going to be able to add to an offense that, works the quick game, right? Works play action, right? You're going to get him into some spots where he can, run the sneak route underneath, maybe make a man miss or two after the catch. And I think he can do that, right? The speed is there. I think it's pretty solid overall. But again, a guy who at 254, I think has still a little bit of nastiness to his game too, and he plays with some power in terms of what he can do in line. I just think there needs to be some work done overall with just technique, right? And not lunging too much, not getting out over your skis too much. We've seen that with other tight ends, like Darnell Washington sometimes. So it's a common occurrence, but I do think KRAFT can improve in that area. But a guy who is going to command plenty of targets in year one if he were to go to Green Bay. So the other tight end to quickly talk about, I think maybe it's a little early here, but again, it's the third round. I think if the Packers hadn't taken a tight end to this point, I think they're potentially looking, and this is a guy I think they would definitely consider, and that's Luke SCHOONMAKER from Michigan. He's 6'5 and a quarter, 251 pounds, a 98th percentile athlete at the tight end position. I do think, when you look at his game, 2022 was pretty solid, 2.15 yards per route run, 35 catches, 418 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Solid numbers, obviously, for a player who definitely does a lot of his work in line. And I think that's very clear. You're looking at him as a true wide tight end. Aren't a huge number of those true wide types early in the draft, right? You're looking at, we just talked about KRAFT. He's really not that. SCHOONMAKER is that. And in terms of, hand placement, right? Unlocking and driving with your hips, latching on, good extension, right? Pass protection, all of those things to where he's displacing defenders, right? He's getting them on the move. He's doing a lot of things that a lot of these receiving tight ends can't, right? And so that ability as a blocker, I think, is something that Green Bay is going to want if they continue to, harp on 11 personnel, 12 personnel. They're going to want to have a guy out there who, even an 11 can be extension of the run game. And I think SCHOONMAKER can be that. Another guy who has a natural pair of hands, really. I think there is some fluidity in his routes. He's more of the guy who does the speed turn rather than the choppy steps, and most tight ends are that. But I do think when you watch him in zone coverage, I think he needs to watch out for getting contacted, right? I think he made some adjustments to that when he's getting into a stem where he's dipping, to reduce surface area, less area to contact when he's working through that area. But I think overall, like the route running and receiving ability for him is solid overall, and that floor is going to be nice when you see that athleticism to unlock, right, as well as a receiver. So he's got the inline stuff down, the blocking stuff down, but maybe there's more to unlock as a receiver, and it might take some time, but it might be worth it for the Packers. So moving over to the defensive side of the football, I think there are a lot of good fits overall. I think edge is obviously one we're going to talk about heavily, but let's start with defensive tackle, because I do think Green Bay is going to eventually take one. I don't know where it's going to end up, but this guy maybe not the biggest fit in terms of what the Packers normally do, at least with their trends, but JAQUELIN Roy from LSU, defensive tackle, 6'3 and 3/8, 305 pounds. The RAS is a little low, and I think that's maybe where the athletic testing, you might not be on their board, but I do think the fit is strong here. Obviously, a 37th percentile athlete. Arms are a little short at 32 3/4 inches, but the numbers from 2022 are pretty impressive. 27 pressures from the interior and 25 run stops. So I think overall, when you look at Roy and what he does, he's going to be the guy that rotates in and becomes that one tech, that nose tackle, and a lot of 5-man fronts that Green Bay likes to do on early downs to control the line of scrimmage. That's what he's going to be, right? He's going to be a line of scrimmage controller. And that's something where, when you stay strong at the point of attack, get extension, lock out, right? Get into your gap and really sit and leverage. And that's something he does really well. He can also snap to other gaps, right? He can control 2 gaps, right? Because he is, I think, just really strong, and he gets good leverage overall, and he does a great job getting off blocks, right? He can use his vision, right? He's really strong in that area to kind of see where running backs are going to attack and kind of get into the gap that he needs to tackle and wrap him up. I think there's stuff to unlock as a pass rusher in terms of he can club, he can get arm over, but he can also go straight speed to power. There's times where he's, one-on-one with centers and he's driving them back into the lap of the quarterback. So there is some pass rush there, but ultimately you want Roy to be rotating in with Slayton, and that's something that I think he can do early on in his career and eventually, hopefully, be the nose tackle one tech that Green Bay deploys 100% of the time on early downs to control the run. So that's something that definitely could be the case for Roy, and that's why I think he's a good fit, despite maybe not meeting athletic thresholds, maybe arm length thresholds, we'll see, but I think the fit there is strong. Okay, moving over to edge now. Let's talk about Zach Harrison first, because I do think this is really a real Packer type at the position. When you look at him, 6'5.5", 274 pounds, right? This is getting closer to Gary territory now. 87th percentile athlete, pretty strong there. 36.25-inch arms. That is ridiculous length at the position, right? 33 pressures and 6 sacks in 2022. Not bad. Not too shabby. The production you'd like to see maybe a little bit more, but like overall, Zach Harrison, this is exactly the type of player the Packers like, right? This big, longer, more powerful edge rusher who's going to be, a helpful force in the run game, but I think who can generate some as a pass rusher. Right now, as a pass rusher, what he is he's never going to win the corner, right? I don't think you're not going to see that very often, but I think what he does well is there's some good hand usage at contact point, right? You're extending, you're getting to the long arm, right? You'll be able to, engage and then chop or hand swipe to get around. I think he does a solid job at that, but I do think when he can convert speed to power, he is a troublemaker. He can win with an inside move. I think he's a strong enough athlete in a straight line with a little bit of change of direction skills to do that. So I think there, as a pass rusher, you can maybe slide him inside. He's at 274. Maybe get him a little interior rushers at times, maybe on third downs to get some pressure on the quarterback, right? You can get creative with him, but ultimately you want him to be playing every down edge. This may be a little bit more of a developmental project than others that we've talked about previously, but I think overall, like you're looking at a high upside player. I don't love what I've seen in coverage ultimately, right? So this is going to be just a down edge. Get after the quarterback, set strong edges, win some speed to power, right? Collapse the pocket. That's the type of player you're looking for in Harrison. And that's probably the type of player you're going to see with the rest of these edge guys. Let's go to the next one here with Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. Now, another player, a couple of these guys you could be looking at and be like, are they going to go between the 40s and 70s? Are they going to be too early for Green Bay? Potentially, but I do think there is a chance. There's been reports that Foskey isn't super high in NFL circles. Could that mean round 3? Maybe. Maybe it doesn't. But ultimately, you see with him, 6'5 and 1/8, 264, right? That's plenty big enough. 96th percentile athlete, 34-inch arms, and has 65 pressures the last 2 seasons and has double-digit sacks in both of those seasons. So with Foskey, what do you see? Well, another guy who, again, I think speed to power, long arm, right? Has the length to create leverage at contact because it's harder for offensive linemen to get into his chest. Same with Harrison, right? But I do think with Harrison, sometimes the punches don't land. With Foskey, the punches definitely land. And when they land, I think he does a great job. He gets to the cross chop, the hand swipe really well. That's really his go-to, is to kind of chop or push down that outside arm from tackles and then swipe through to create a quicker lane to kind of soften that edge to get around and create pressure. A tremendous athlete. Obviously, you see that in testing, but ultimately, in 2021, he took snaps at off-ball linebacker. I don't think you understand how good he is at changing direction, right? How he can thrive when he drops into coverage, right? This is a lot of things that he can do that maybe other guys cannot. And I think that's where the fit really lies, is how strong of an athlete he is. You can teach him with the inside move, right? I think he can be efficient enough to be a spin move type of player, right? So you're going to be able to add to the array of pass rush moves. He's really got one go-to right now, which is that cross chop, right, after he engages at contact. So you'd like to unlock a little bit more there. But I think Foskey, in terms of athleticism, in terms of what you can unlock as a pass rusher, is great because he's already a strong run defender, right? Good extension. He can lock out. He can push the line of scrimmage backwards. Very often there's a sequence of plays against North Carolina where he twice just pushed the guy back at the point of attack and really disrupted 2 run plays in a row, kept him out of the end zone. And that's the type of thing I think you would see with Foskey early on. And again, with the athleticism that you see functionally on the field, not just in the testing, to unlock a lot more as a pass rusher. Okay, another guy on the edge. Again, probably in this FOSKEY area where like, he could maybe go in the 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe ahead of Green Bay. Maybe they'll have to move up for him. But that's DERICK Hall from Auburn. Not as big as the rest on this list, but DERICK Hall, 6'2 3/4, 254 pounds. He's more in that range of Felix Anudike-Uzomah, right? 93 percentile athlete, 34.5-inch arms. He's got long arms, 47 pressures and 8 sacks in 2022. How about 10 sacks in 2021? This is a guy who's got a pretty high pass rush win rate over the last couple seasons, and that definitely shows. Now, DERICK Hall is the one-trick pony, right? This is the long arm. This is the sit and leverage as a run defender, right? That's what he does, and he has to get to his leverage points as a pass rusher with that long arm if he's going to create pressure at all, right? He has to get to the correct point where he leverages into the chest, into the armpit, where offensive linemen struggle to gain any sort of leverage, gain any sort of control with their hands. He has to time that up perfectly. If he does that, we're cooking with gas because he, again, has established early leverage. He can get to swipes. He can get arm over, right? He can do a lot of things off of that, but that is his leverage point right now. That's it. There's nothing else in the bag. Once he gets to that point, there are some other things he can get to counter, but ultimately, like, his pass rush win rate is super dependent on his ability to land that first strike with the long arm. Otherwise, he's getting stopped in his tracks, right? He can't get to counters if that leverage point isn't achieved. So, again, that's something where you're going to have to work on with him. But again, with that length, I think he's more explosive and twitchy when you look at him out of his stance than maybe the other two that we've mentioned so far. You see a lot more explosiveness and just loose flexibility in terms of the twitch and change of direction that he has. So that's encouraging in terms of developing more moves. But ultimately, like, right, we have to figure out leverage points. We have to work on other ones because you can't keep going to that over and over unless you're like elite of the elite. But again, even then, tackles can vary up punches, right? They're able to keep leverage, right? They're going to mirror and stay in front of you. They're going to make sure you aren't cornering, right? And the edge isn't going to be softened. If you don't have an inside move, they know they're got to set wide and they're going to drive you out of the play immediately. So that's something Hall has to work on, right? For sure. But another strong fit for the Packers, no doubt about it. Now, the last edge rusher I want to talk about, Isaiah McGuire from Missouri, 6'4 3/8, 268 pounds, 95th percentile athlete. Pretty solid year, I would say, in 2022. 35 pressures, 7 sacks. That's right on par with pretty much everybody else. Obviously, Hall has the most pressures from 2022. But when you look at McGuire, again, it's another speed to power guy who I think, I think what he does, though, really well is you can see him convert that speed to power and trim the edge really well at contact point because he's explosive with 2 steps for sure off the snap, whether it be when he's in a 2-point stance or in a 3 or 4-point stance. Like, he generates it when he's low in that 3 or 4-point stance, but he also gets really good stride length, and that first 2 steps are really explosive even when he's in a 2-point stance. And that's not something that a lot of these guys in this class can do. That might separate him a little bit. Again, another strong run defender. I think with the length, he can kind of push-pull. You see him do that multiple times to Broderick Jones in the Georgia game this past season. That was impressive to watch, and I think he is pretty much a handful. I think there's another kind of gear he can unlock in that 3rd step, and there's a couple reps where, the first 2 steps are solid, right? They're explosive, but you see this 3rd one where he gets super low into your chest, right? That explosive step, the amount of momentum and the power that he generates from that step and that step only is something that's really impressive. And you see him knock back guys because of that. They're not ready for what's coming. Again, another guy that the toolbox must be expanded, right? He's trying though on film. He's trying to get to, spin moves, whatnot. He's trying to kind of dip, rip, and corner. That's just really not his game though. So you see him on the ground a little bit. You see him in bad positions because he's not, once again, getting to the right leverage points that we need to in the contact phase, and that's just not happening. But again, another guy in the 3rd round that I feel very comfortable taking a swing on because you've seen it. There's decent production there in the SEC. So I'm definitely willing to swing there. And I think the Packers would as well. McGuire maybe a tad early at 78, depending on who you talk to, but I think he's definitely in that range where I wouldn't hate the selection at all, and obviously the fit is there. Now we're going to move to defensive backs, and I'm going to start for sure with this guy because, again, SEC school, we like to see that. It just means more, right? Darius Rush from South Carolina. Maybe you call him the other South Carolina corner in this class, I guess, if you want to. 6'1 7/8, 198 pounds. 98th percentile athlete. Pretty solid year, 6 pass breakups and 2 interceptions in 2021. So the first thing you see with Rush on film is I think you see obviously the height and the length that he possesses, no doubt about it, how physical he can play, and his ability to turn and run with guys vertically. Like, he can definitely do that, right? He's got the stride length to do it, right? He's not maybe overly explosive on film, but again, he's got long strides enough where he can keep up with guys. I think the real questions that I have for Rush are in terms of, again, he plays press okay, right? He's physical enough, but when he's in a little bit softer, when he's getting one arm out there rather than lunging forward and jamming, a little bit softer with a little bit not as aggressive of a jam, I think he gets out of position. And there are times where he's shuffling backwards in some soft press and he's trying to lunge out. And when guys can combat you that way, you get thrown off your game, you get thrown off balance, right? And you're losing quick routes. And that's something that definitely happened in the 2022 film with Rush. And that was not something I was expecting to see for a guy as big and reportedly as physical as he is. So that shocked me a lot. And I think he lost a lot of reps in more of soft press like that. And that's something, again, that can happen. I think the other thing with him for sure is just transitionally how he is in terms of off coverage. I think it's just a little bit slower. And again, he kind of strides like high knees, and that sometimes gets him into trouble in terms of transitioning downhill, right? Obviously a strong tackler, he plays physical, but like overall, like just didn't love what he did transitionally. I think he's more of a turn, run, go vertically, and that's kind of in the realm of Akili Ringo as well in this class. So not super impressed, but I think in the third round, if the Packers have a corner on their mind and Rush is one of them, it wouldn't shock me if he's a fit here for them, just because, again, I think when Gutekunst mentions corner as a deep class, I imagine he's going to select one, especially with Stokes' uncertainty. Where's Rasul Douglas going to play, right? And that kind of, shrinks the room a little bit. And you're kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe there is something that we need to address. Now, the next guy to talk about in the DB room, he's played corner. Kenton talks a little bit about safety, but I'll tell you what, I was really impressed with this guy. He's shooting up my board for sure after watching him. That's Corey Trice from Purdue. 6'3" and 3/8", 206 pounds, 96th percentile athlete. Only 2 missed tackles. And that may not seem like, oh, it's not a big number, but like genuinely with how aggressive he plays, physical tackler he is, it's a big deal. 9 pass breakups and 2 picks for him in 2022. Now for Trice, it's a lot of physical ball, right? He can play physical. He has good press technique at the line of scrimmage, right? He can disrupt timing on routes really quickly. But what stands out with Trice is even if he loses some initial leverage, he can make that up with explosiveness, with closing speed, right? He has that ability, and he's definitely a guy who's going to challenge you at the catch point, right? He's not going to give up an inch when he's got leverage. It's something where you look at him and you see the catch point prowess and the ball skills on film as well, and you just look at him and like, that's how someone should be playing corner, no doubt about it. And you look at, the 2 picks, but you also look at how well he plays the run and how in space he's a really strong tackler. He finds the shoestring at times, right? But he's not afraid to come up and hit you either. And I think Corey Trice should be getting more recognition in this class, no doubt about it, because I think he plays physical. The technique is strong. Transitionally, he's pretty good. He's not too super high-hipped at all or anything like that. And I think his ability to close and man the catch point and gain control at the catch point is really impressive overall. I was really impressed with what I saw from Trice at corner from Purdue. And I think that would be a guy I'd be pounding the table for in round 3, and somebody that the Packers might just say, you know what, yeah, let's stop the slide even potentially with him. Last guy I want to talk about is a defensive back from Illinois. We haven't talked about safety yet, if you've noticed that, and I just don't know how many fits there are going to be for Green Bay early. They might threshold bend, we'll see, but this is somebody who I think is a fit, and that's Jartavius Martin, or Quan Martin. Some people know him by that. Some people call him that. That's fair. 5'11", 194. So he's a little bit on the lighter side, but so is the safety class. So is its class as a whole. Everybody's small, right? So it's hard to find some of these bigger guys, but almost a 93rd percentile athlete. And I think when you look at the versatility in these obviously very surface level box score stats, you see 16 stops, and that's, in the run game or in space, 10 pass breakups, 3 picks. So the ball production is clearly there as well. Now with Jartavius Martin, what you see, oh man, you see versatility, right? He's played slot corner. The last couple of games of the season against Michigan and Northwestern, he's playing outside corner. And he's also playing single high safety. And I think ultimately, like when you look at him at corner, I think you see him be able to play physical, right? He can catch technique when he's in off coverage. I think he's just a tad bit slow transitionally. And I think guys, who are twitchier, run the whip route, right, set him up with some, a diamond release or something like that, where they're immediately threatening leverage and they're breaking off their routes really efficiently. He kind of struggles to get back into phase, but I do think he's explosive and has closing speed to kind of potentially make up for it. But it's hard to do that definitely on like crossers and whatnot, which is where, a lot of the coverage responsibility lies in the slot. On the outside, I think he's fine. He's just not going to be, a guy that you're going to play at outside corner. I think it's single high safety. He crushes it. And if you want to put him in the box as well, that's fine. Like tremendous tackler, right? Enforcer as well. But he's just not going to miss tackles, right? He's going to wrap up if he feels like, he's in a position where he can't really lay the boom or be super physical, right? He's still going to wrap you up, and he's going to limit yardage after the catch, even if he's giving up underneath throws. And that's something he did definitely in the slot where, you've got second and medium and guys are getting open, but like when Martin's able to recover and get to him, he's not getting any yardage after contact, right? That's shut down immediately. I think as a single high safety, you could maybe question the range, but like athletically, we've seen the range, and I think we see enough closing speed. I think he's a really strong processor, and that culminates in a lot of plays where he's firing downhill on dig routes or crossers, right? And he's really laying the boom, and he's there just maybe a half second late, but he's able to recognize route concepts. That's very, very clear as well. I think he, as a guy who could play in too high in a quarters world, he's going to be just fine, I think, as well, because I think he understands, route concepts and coverage responsibility and communication for sure. The Illinois DBs communicated so effectively in college overall this past season. So I think, that communication is going to be there. And again, like I said, if he's in a deep half in quarters or, cover two or whatnot, like I think he's going to be just fine. And if you want to throw him in single high, I think he's a good enough processor to do so. And I think that's why he is honestly probably my favorite safety fit the Packers have, other than maybe Brian Branch, right? Like there are other guys, but ultimately I think Martin is somebody as well as Trice I'd be pounding the table for in the third round. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode on round 3 fits for the Green Bay Packers in the 2023 NFL Draft. If you did, throw a like down there, subscribe if you're new. There's plenty more content still coming before the big night on draft weekend. Excited for that. There's going to be a live show or two. That'll be fun. Come here, 7 p.m. Thursday night for sure. In the first round, we'll have a live show. And yeah, there'll be plenty of reactionary film room content as the draft unfolds. So thank you guys for tuning into this video. I will see you in the next video. Farewell.